Why, thank you.
Well, so Karen, do you want everyone to sign in the chat room just to say who we are and where we're from?
Yes, if you can say where you're from. I have someone that's checking off names. I do have the registration list. The nice thing about that also would be knowing where you're from. So please go ahead.
Karen, there was also a question if participants will receive slides.
Oh, that is a great question. I will be sending out a link to a YouTube where I can house the slides. So everything, even the recording, will be housed on the YouTube page. And so when we send out the response to all questions that were not answered in this meeting, we will send you the link to the YouTube, so you'll have access to all the slides, the recording, and anything else that has to do with this topic will all be housed. Even the response questions we'll be able to house there as well. So you'll have access to everything.
I wanted to say that Tasso and Gertie Candris, or Anastasia as written on the screen, we are board members of the Behavioral Health Board in San Joaquin County.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
Lori, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sorry, real quick, Karen, do you want me to press record to the cloud? I know you're kind of multitasking.
Is it not recording to the cloud?
I'm not too sure.
I don't want to pause recording.
Okay.
Well, if you can record to the, it says it's recording.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's recording. If it records on my computer, it'll still be uploaded.
Okay. Sorry about
Thank you.
Okay, is this where I can go ahead and get started, Karen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. I'm Laurie Hallmark. I am the Special Project Director for Mental Health Programs at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. We have a PAD project, and that's what I do, all things PAD. I've been doing all things PADs for a little over 4 years now, so I am very pleased to be able to talk about this topic. It is my favorite topic in the whole world. So thank y'all in advance for allowing me to engage with you. On April 1st, there is going to be a presentation that's specifically directed to peers and consumers. So I think that that's important to take note of. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about our project so that you have kind of a grounding in where I'm coming from, because our system is very different, obviously, than California, although many of these issues are they're standard, they're across the board. They don't have boundaries. Okay. So our service area, we are large. Texas has many counties, but we have 68 counties in our service area. So we cover Austin, San Antonio, across to El Paso, that whole big swath of Texas. That's a lot of it's just completely bare. And then the entire Rio Grande Valley down from El Paso all the way to Brownsville and up. And so we have a variety of different types of clients. We do, there's urban, there's rural. So I think that that's really important to note, that we represent and I regularly engage with clients who are from all those different kinds of geographic facts. So the way that we work, y'all have I know with the Innovation Project, you have the ability to focus on single populations. We do not. So what our priority population is for our project is people with serious mental illness. We specifically focus as much as we can on the people who need our help the most. And so that means any psychosis, anybody who is experiencing homelessness, that's basically what engaged with the criminal justice system. The more they need us, the higher priority on our list they are. It's the same thing with like our family law team. They prioritize, extreme domestic violence and sexual assault, the same thing. So we have all of these different populations that come in under our priority population. Okay, so with people who are experiencing homelessness, the way that we engage with those clients pre-COVID, what we were able to do is go in person to places that provide in-person services and have regular clinics. That's, if, you know, we call it clinic, a legal clinic. Setting up a table, like actually just putting a table out, sitting there, engaging with people, walking out, engaging with people, asking if they would like a rights document, and coming back and sitting there and doing it right then. That's going to be a shorter document than is possible if we represent people over a long period of time. When it comes to unsheltered homeless since COVID, this has obviously been incredibly challenging because we are not permitted to go around clients in person under any circumstances. So what we're trying to do is, and this is going to be great post-COVID too, is we're trying to set up workstation kiosks with the folks who are providing in-person services, so that if someone goes to get some food, or if they go to get a shower or whatever, there is a set time that they can also sit down and engage and create a pad. Mental health court, we have trained, there's a new mental health court in Galveston, and they, based on their learning about pads, they decided to hire a peer. And then our team trained the peer to do pads, as well as the defense attorney who is assigned to the court. It is really important to note here that it is not a coercive thing. So it's not like you come into the court, we're going to, you know, coerce you into creating a pad that you have to do it, and now we're holding you to it, and, you know, we're going to put you in jail if you don't follow it. It's not that at all. And they understand that. It's the exact opposite. The really cool thing about that as well is that because the community came together to create a mental health court, you have a broad-based community collaboration that's focused specifically on these issues and this population. And so there's the local mental health authority has reached out, and they want to expand being able to provide psychiatric advanced directives to their population. They're looking at being able to pull in the directives into their crisis outreach. So again, there's this really great opportunity when you have the community pulling together to address the issue holistically. Veterans, we have a medical legal partnership with our VA here in San Antonio, Audie Murphy. We have, I have approval from a regional lawyer with the VA, as well as the Office of General Counsel in Washington, DC, for doing pads. They are all about it. The way that we get them into the system, it's different than with civilians, but they have a VA specific form with advanced directives, and we latch it onto there. And what that enables us to do is it goes into the system in a way that the VA already is within their procedures and their standard operating procedure. So we attach it into a standard operating procedure, which is really helpful. People under conservatorship. So we have, I have clients who are under conservatorship, and they are trying to get some of their rights back. So it's rights restoration cases. And a PAD is really great when it comes to looking at issues with conservatorship, because it's a planning document, right? It's the ability to say, hey, you know what? I may go into crisis in the future, but look, I've got a plan. And so it can really address those kinds of concerns when it comes to why someone with serious mental illness would be at risk of being placed under conservatorship, or would already be under conservatorship. It also gives the opportunity to look at the goals, to identify supporters, and to be able to address the issues that have led to the conservatorship being placed in the first place, or at risk of it. People who apply, I mean, obviously with extreme poverty, that's who we represent. All too often, that's our population that we're talking about. It's just the poverty goes alongside for many, many bad reasons. But so we work with all of our clients have to qualify financially. So they're all within pretty extreme poverty, some more than others, but it obviously looks different in rural communities than in urban areas. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a neighbor back there, and I think they're drilling. Okay, so people who apply for other legal services, this means people who come into our system when they have an issue with like some other legal issue, they have a housing case, they have a family law case, they have whatever other legal issue that they apply. This is a really great example of how we can help someone to create a PAD even if they don't identify as having a mental illness, and even if they don't identify with a diagnosis, and even if there is an issue with delusions. Okay, so for example, there are many people who apply for our services because they believe that the FBI is spying on them, or someone has put a tracking device in their head, issues like that. So they'll apply and they'll ask for help suing, the government or whoever because of this, violation. Now, obviously, we are not going to help them sue whichever entity. However, because we have this project, what it enables us to do, and this is just a really great example of why a person not accepting a diagnosis or being inside psychosis it does not have to be a barrier to creating a PAD or to receiving services, because we don't challenge the delusion. We say, hey, we know a lot of people who also have this experience, not that the underlying experience is real, but that have this experience, who have been hospitalized, who have had engagements with the police, and we can help you to create a rights document that can help you if those situations arise. That's how we get into it, so that we're able to open the door to be able to help people, and that the need, it does not become a barrier to the help. Okay, and so we also have special populations, in the border. There's farm workers, we have colonialists. When it comes to special populations, the community involvement is critical. Okay, so what are they? Just kind of going over pretty briefly here. Okay, so it's a self-determination based legal document. That is what it is. It cannot be coerced. It's not going to work. This is at essence a self-determination based legal document. It enables a person to prepare in advance of a crisis. So, this is a really big component of recovery. Yeah, I hope that I don't ever have a mental health crisis. I don't want that to ever happen. But if it does, I've got a plan so that the rest of my life doesn't fall apart, right? So that I know what's going to happen. I've prepared in advance. It's a way to have a voice at a time when people might otherwise not be able to have a voice. So it maximizes people's ability to make decisions, because I get to make decisions when I'm well that will be used as the expression of my wishes when I'm unwell, when I would be unable for a variety of reasons to be able to express my wishes. Now I have, because it's on this piece of paper, it's in this legal document. So inside, there are many different options for like a menu of what you would put in your PAD. And this is going to vary depending on the population. Sometimes you can add more sections or less, just based on a variety of factors. Preferences for regarding medications and treatments. This is where the person gets to say, hey, you know what, these are the meds I'm on right now. These are the meds that have worked for me in the past. And guess what? These are the meds that have not worked for me in the past that I do not want to take. Identifying supporters and agents. This is really important when someone is in a mental health crisis. The ability to be able to have someone who's able to make medical decisions. If a doctor decides the person is unable to make medical decisions, to be able to have that identified in the PAD and go ahead and handle it at the same time. It's very important. Supporters is obviously going to be, who are the people in my life that I trust and want to be able to help me. There's all kinds of tools that the PAD elicits that can help with the engagement between consumers, people with mental health challenges, and not just providers, but community-based services, hospitals, jails, law enforcement, crisis personnel. The document, to be its most effective to address the cycle of recidivism, needs to be used across the system. And there are very concrete ways that that PADs improve people's lives on the other side, right? So the folks within these different systems, the idea is to help with their job too. Practical matters, and this is where dealing with, okay, if I go into a hospital, if I have a mental health crisis and I haven't prepared in advance, the rest of my life can fall apart. Who's paying my rent? Who's paying my bills? Am I scheduled to get something from the Social Security Administration right now? All of those different things that, if you imagine, if you're just suddenly away from your life, would fall apart. And so now you not only have you had a mental health crisis, but you come out And all of these other things are now in disarray. And that is just real, it's avoidable. And this is a planning document that can help to avoid that. Physical medical conditions. This one is really important. We added this one in when we recognized, we began to see that so many of our clients, they had, physical medical problems. The problem was that when they went to seek help, oftentimes to the emergency room, the expression of their mental health challenges was obscuring the medical issues that the person needed help for. And so that's another way that the PAD is really important. And then there are additional section options, which I will get to. Okay, so why? So many reasons. Recovery and self-determination. I think that PADs they're a critical component of recovery. I mean, this is all about, not only am I able to make decisions for myself, but I'm looking at it and going, hey, I don't ever want this to happen again. But if it does, I have a plan. And that's part of managing my my mental health challenges long-term. It's just a critical component of it. The reality of, I don't ever want this to happen, but if it does, I've prepared for it and we have a plan, and I know what's going to happen. Well, within reason. Coordination of care. Okay. So we all know that coordination of care, I suspect that California is very similar to Texas in this, that it's just a huge challenge, right? So it doesn't really happen. Typically, it doesn't really happen. If it does, it's not happening well. There's not a smooth transition across the silos. Now, so for example, so silos within the same system. So have a client who she lives out in West Texas in the middle of nowhere. And so if she goes to a hospital, it's a couple of hours away, right? It's like 3 hours away. So when she goes to a hospital, so she hasn't been in a really long time, she's doing great. But she went to a hospital and, they adjust, they change the meds around. So she's on the meds that they've had her on in the hospital. She's doing a lot better. She comes out and she wants to stay on those meds. Here's the problem. And I'm sure that y'all know this. They cannot let her walk out of the hospital with pills. She can have a prescription. However, she has some of her meds are at the local mental health authority. She can't get any refills for those. She has this prescription in her hand. How is she going to get that refilled? And now she has what would be, if she had to take a bus, about a 24-hour bus ride to get from the hospital back to her home. Now, is there a mechanism to have coordination between the hospital and the local mental health authority? Yes, there is, but it doesn't address this problem of she walks out of the hospital. She has no way to get home. How is she even going to take the prescription, her dose that night? I mean, how is she going to get it? We did manage to do it, but it took multiple attorneys and all kinds of effort to be able to do that. And when I encounter these kinds of issues with my clients, I'm very fortunate because I have been able to travel with them through the system. And so it's like Plinko for anybody who's old enough to remember that from The Price is Right. I have had the benefit, the luxury of being able to go alongside my clients as they bonk around through the different parts of the system. And what that enables is it enables us to see, okay, well, this is this huge gap. And this is an opportunity where PADs could help to bring that gap together. But at the same time, the fact that you're using the PAD and you're trying to get it to go with the human through the different systems, it really elucidates these different challenges that need to be addressed that can be if everybody is working together, which is the coordination that is enabled by the PADs. I end up wondering half the time, not why are people cycling, but how does anybody not cycle? I mean, I have a client who, she wants to stay on this med, that she's doing well. She wants to be able to take it. And how in the world do we get her a prescription that night? Those are the kinds of things that the PAD can enable the connection that is not otherwise there. Silos across systems. So I have a client, or she had a client. She was a public defender client. She grew up in a very impoverished area of Houston. She was the first person in her family to go to college. She got some sort of really like amazing science degree, things that I don't understand. So she was trying to talk to me about it. And it was a great way to try to connect, except for I didn't understand what she was saying. But she was sent from the jail to, she was doing very poorly. She was sent from the jail to a hospital down in the valley, to a psych hospital down in the valley. I was able to go and see her. It was a bad situation in the hospital. However, there was a doctor that she was seeing over telemedicine that she trusted, that she liked, and she was willing to take the meds that he was prescribing, and she wanted to take them. She found them to be beneficial. And this is a person who, for about, I'd say 15 to 20 years after she had her, it was bipolar 1, so it was a mania psychotic break where her entire life fell apart. She had involuntary hospitalizations, and she ended up not wanting anything to do with the mental health system. So this was the first time that she's had a positive engagement in who knows how long, if ever. To be able to get, when she's going to be transferred back, so now she's gone from inside a jail to a civil private hospital with a doctor that's given her prescription there, and now she's going back to the jail. The complications with being able to get the prescription that she wants to take filled and then continue to be renewed, it probably took, I would say, about 40 hours of my time to be able just to get that accomplished. So these silos, they're just so separate, and they don't have to be. The pad itself can function as a literal on the page connection, not just within the systems, but across the systems. And that's the whole point. Okay, medical records, even if you have this cross connection between the systems, right, inside systems or across systems, who has time to look at, thousands of pages of medical records to try to figure out, okay, what is most important? No one has time for that. Even if you deal with HIPAA and all different kinds of stuff like that, still, like, there's just not time. But the pad is able to condense the most essential information so that everyone, again, sees the same essential information. And so those problems are, they're eliminated when you have the ability to have everybody look at the same essential information across these different components of the systems. Okay, it can also function, a pad can function as a bridge between the criminal side of our lives and the civil side. So we have a current client, she, an attorney who had attended a presentation on alternatives to conservatorship, was routed around and ended up with me. And so I explained about PAD. She has a client. She's also a court investigator. And they were looking at two things with this client. They were looking at, she was on the, they were considering putting her under conservatorship, and she also has criminal charges pending, okay, because of an incident that had occurred, an interpersonal incident. She has, she's early elderly. She definitely, in effect, she's older than her years. She's deaf. Her first language is Spanish. She does speak ASL, and she has psychosis. So we're talking a lot of challenges. She's been arrested just over and over again through the years for it's usually interpersonal issues. And she's been in forensic hospitals in all kinds of places. Anyway, so what we have been working with this client, and she's still a current client, is we are working with her. She's inside a state psych hospital right now, but she's being discharged this week. We have been able to work with her to work on her PAD, and this is a more expanded PAD, and it really focuses on trying to address those interpersonal issues, as well as to give her as much control over her life and address things with the communication barriers. But because of the work that we're doing, the criminal situation as well as the conservatorship situation has been placed on pause. So what we anticipate is that as she transitions back into the community, we are already working with the hospital staff, is communicating with the local provider that's going to be helping her when she gets out, with the group home that's also, it's all deaf. So the PAD itself is doing exactly what it's intended to do for this client. And that's a great example of how it can be a bridge between the criminal and the civil, which is so important for the cycle of recidivism. Okay, resources. Our county hospital system was really happy about this because when they have people come in, they end up wasting resources on things that don't work and that are not going to work. So for what they told me from their perspective, they would much rather have this information up front so they don't waste time. So they don't waste resources trying to do things that's not going to work, that's not going to work and that the person will not accept. Obviously, there are safety issues if someone, whoever doesn't know what meds the person is on, going cold turkey off of a med, pads can help address all of those kinds of issues as well. When you have a pad that enables a change in the engagement with providers and law enforcement, that is really critical because it can flip that dynamic upside down so that whereas in the past, what you may have had is a combative or, a relationship that really is kind of, they're hitting upon each other. With the pad, when you're able to demonstrate, hey, these are your wishes, and guess what, I'm following them. Also, wow, I have all this critical information that this person who is in crisis cannot tell me right now, and now I see how to connect. That totally changes the dynamic of the relationship, and that is so important for being able to help someone over long term. And entrance for additional resources. Okay, so when we were able to go out into the community where people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness are living, and when we were able to engage with them directly in person, the way that we would approach people, because these are, people who are separate from the system, right? They're not typically engaging the system too much. They're accessing, I'm offering you this one thing right now, but the bigger parts of the system that could address longer term issues, they're typically not engaging with. However, what we discovered is when we help someone create a psychiatric advanced directive, it has not mattered. I mean, they have to be able to communicate with us, but I mean, people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness, we sit down, we create a rights document for them. And that's what it is. And the ability to express what you want. I mean, if I think about it, that, someone who's experiencing homelessness, how many decisions does that person actually get to make when it comes to if services are being provided or if food is being provided? They don't ever get to make a decision, right? It's usually, this is what you're going to get. And the ability to sit down with that human being and go, you know what, I want to know what you want. And let's talk about what your decisions are and to put it into a legal document. My clients that have serious mental illness creating pads, I think they're the best clients ever, but I am a little biased, but they care so much about each word in their document. This is my pad, and every single word, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But what this does is once we have that connection, right? We've demonstrated I work for you. I'm creating this pad for you. This is your pad. I'm just helping you to create it. Once we've had that kind of connection with the human being, they come back. They come back for, hey, you know what? I've got this other problem over here. Can you help me with this over here? And so it's a real way when you've established that relationship for people to come back. The woman that I was speaking about, who was the school teacher, for a variety of reasons that I'm not going to go into, I ended up losing touch with her. It happened really quickly and just a cascading of Plinko events. A year and a half later, and so I was, I just thought, I've lost her, and that's going to happen. But a year and a half later, she called me. She left a voicemail, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm assuming she had my card, although some clients are really great with remembering phone numbers. But she called me and she left a voicemail, and I when I tried to call her back, the phone was no longer working. I haven't been able to communicate with her again. But a year and a half later, she reached out, and that is really important. I'm going to keep that phone number for as long as they'll let me. I've so far, they keep trying to get me to change the number since I've moved, but I'm trying to hold on to it because maybe she'll call back or someone else. Okay, the criminal justice component. There's such an opportunity here with PADS and criminal justice reform. First, we want to just avoid crises in the first place, right? There are sections in the pad that I'm going to get to that are all about, let's just avoid the crises in the first place. However, if there is an engagement with law enforcement, what we definitely want to do is to create a method for de-escalation as much as possible. Now, crisis intervention teams, they are fantastic. We have a really great one in Houston. But there is also individualized information that is very important that can assist with de-escalation so that we don't end up with people being arrested. So what we see a lot of times here is, and I'm sure that y'all see this there as well, is somebody is maybe talking to themselves, walking around, I don't know, like a gas station or something, and someone becomes uncomfortable or they want them to leave, and the police are called. And now you have an engagement with law enforcement. And as soon as that happens, I mean, y'all know what the deal is. As soon as there is an engagement there is the potential for things to go very wrong very quickly. And for there to be, you know, an escalation that's dangerous, as well as just being arrested in the first place. So reducing the criminalization of mental illness and assisting so that law enforcement isn't having these really difficult, and making it as the least difficult as it can be. And of course, again, here, this changes that relationship. You have the opportunity with that information to change that dynamic in that relationship so that when I see law enforcement next time, hey, those guys, they helped me. Okay. If the person is arrested, pads are a way, and I'm going to get to this section, they are a way to reduce people's entrance into the competency cycle. So people who are declared incompetent, and we all know what the problem is with this. It's a human rights issue and it's an economic issue. I mean, it's terrible for the people who are sitting in jail waiting to be restored, waiting to be sent to a forensic hospital or whatever to be restored. And even if they're doing, you know, rights restoration in the community or within the jail, still, we're talking about human rights issues, but it's also an economic issue. It's expensive to have someone sitting in a jail for, you know, a year or however long. This is expensive. So I love it when human rights and economics align. And I think that the PAD is a great example of that, and specifically reducing the number of people who enter into the potentially entering into the competency cycle of being declared incompetent. Okay, so also we can provide jails with critical information so that their engagement inside the jail with the person is improved, or, you know, made as least, reducing the negative. I mean, obviously, being inside of a jail is the atmosphere alone is going to, it's not conducive to well-being. So everybody has challenges within that situation. Okay, so the other opportunity, so we have, okay, so with criminal justice, in the first place, we don't want the people to have an engagement with law enforcement anyway, right? So that's the first goal. If we don't meet that and there is an engagement with law enforcement, we want it to not escalate so that no one is harmed. And then also we don't want the person to be arrested. So we want to avoid that. If the person is arrested, then we're looking at, okay, well, let's see, you know, if we can reduce the entrance into the competency cycle. Now, let's say that they are arrested, they have, you know, things are moving forward. With pretrial jail diversion, terms of bond, and probation, this is where you have the opportunity to create individualized terms, to provide accommodations within those terms so that the person has the ability to succeed, to complete the terms of their probation. And of course, we know that serious mental illness, it's not static, right? It's not static. There will be there will be mental health struggles. It's not just, you know, recovery is not a cure, right? It's not, okay, I no longer have a mental illness. It's I have learned to manage, to live with the challenges of my life, and I'm in recovery. But because it's foreseeable that it's not static, and we know that, this is the opportunity to be able to create terms, and then also with this critical link of the PAD across the civil and criminal system, you have the ability for those people to communicate with each other so that hopefully you have modifications rather than revocations. Okay, so the section options. There are some sections that are pretty much in every pod, and this is one of them. The psychoactive medication. This is just kind of the very core of the pad. This section is always there. Safety. So I have a client who she went into lithium toxicity in like 2009, and she ended up going into a coma. She improved, time goes by, 10 years goes by, and I'm working with her and I'm looking at her old medical records, which, thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of medical records. And in there, I find this situation that she had been in a coma and everything, and nobody knew it. And so she was on lithium. So, having that information in the pad, that prevents that, right? It provides an opportunity to say, hey, guess what? I've been on this med in the past and it really harmed me, or I'm on this right now, so that someone comes into the hospital and, they're on some kind of an injection or who knows what, they're able to provide them with that information. Okay, so and also actually, so another, I was grasping, I felt it flit through my head. We have clients who have been addicted. So I have a client who's been addicted to benzodiazepines in the past, and it took her a really long time to get off of them. So she has in her pad, do not put me on benzodiazepines. It took me a long time to recover, and I don't want to accidentally, be put on something that now all of my work that I've done is possibly derailed. So this is a chance for the person to say, these are the current meds that I'm on, what works and what doesn't work, and specifically why. So it's really important. We always make sure that when we're talking with our clients about what meds do you not consent to, that we find out why. And this is also an opportunity to find out, have you been on meds in the past that worked, but the side effects were intolerable, and so you don't want to take them. And so having that information, this is all information that's really important and can be just so helpful for providers, and especially to be able to access this information during a time period when the person is not going to be able to express themselves as clearly. So this is the well human speaking at the time when the unwell human may not be able to be as effective in communicating their wishes. We also put in here other treatments and assists. So we don't leave it just to medication. We say, okay, right, meds, that's one thing, but there's all these other things over here. What helps? So do you have all these other wellness tools that you have? What are they? Let's put them in here. Let's make sure that we provide people with information so that they know that, hey, you know what? I am really helped by running, or, whatever it is, I'm really helped by peer groups. I am really helped by, sometimes if I'm feeling super stressed, I watch YouTube videos, whatever it is, we go ahead and make sure that we put it in there. The considerations when considering. This is where we talk about with our clients. We go, okay, what are the important things in your life that you do not want to go away? What makes your life meaningful? And so what our clients will do is they'll tell us, I always think of the same one of the walking, that he loves to be able to walk long distances. And when he was put on a whole bunch of psych meds and he wasn't able to do his walks, that was important to him. And so if the choice becomes between, this thing that I do that gives my life meaning, and I'm not going to take these meds if it destroys this, that's important information, because maybe you have different med options, right? So this is where we can provide that information so that when a provider is discussing potentially, meds with a client, they have that information and they know it's important to that human being. And so they can problem solve with them in a way that's going to hopefully eliminate the dynamic of a conflict. Okay, preferences for emergency treatment. This is pretty much standard in all pads too. So this is where, you're inside a hospital. Also, this works for jails. This is critical information for jails as well. Things are getting heated. The staff is starting to think, okay, well, I need to do an emergency physically engaging intervention right now. So y'all know what this is. This is like forced injection, restraint chairs, restraint beds, and being put in seclusion. So the first thing that the client does is basically say, you know, this is the one that's absolutely the worst for me. We take the opportunity here to make sure that we find out if there are any physical conditions that are impacting here. So for example, if we have a client who has emphysema and has trouble breathing, then that's information that providers need to know before they put the person in restraints, that they could harm them. But the most important part about this section is the opportunity that it gives to provide staff, whether it's in hospital or in a jail or wherever, with tools that will eliminate or drastically reduce the use of these types of physical engagement interventions. So what actually helps? If I'm standing there and I'm getting upset, what can the hospital personnel do that will help for me to feel better or for me to de-escalate? It's the same kind of thing as with law enforcement, but it's different sorts of things. We have a lot of, hey, please offer me a Pepsi or a cold soda. If I can, you know, please offer for me to go outside. Please ask me if I would like to talk with you. They're really detailed. It's very interesting. And one of the things that I'm always amazed by is when we start to kind of really pin it down, we find out that clients will view the same thing in different ways. So for example, if we have a client who sees, if you call me sir, I'm going to feel that that's disrespectful. Or another client that says, please do call me sir, or call me by my last name, or don't call me, you know, by my last name. So there are very detailed things that people can identify that could function as triggers or assists. And it's the smallest little things that can send something going one way or the other. And this is best for everybody, right? Nobody is benefited by these emergency types of interventions. So to the extent that we can avoid them, the better. And this, again, to repeat, this goes along with inside the jails as well. Okay, so within the pad, the person is able to identify supporters. So, hey, guess what? You know, I have this person in my life that is really great with helping me with a legal situation, or I really want them to be able to help me when I'm making decisions about my medical care or my housing. They don't make decisions for me. They help me to gather information. They discuss the different options with me. And then once I've made my decision, they help communicate my choices. And so the entire process of making the Psychiatric Advanced Directive, that's what this is, right? We're working with the client to gather information, understand options, and then put down what their decisions are into a concrete document that can then be this great resource. Designating agents, I mentioned this before. So if you're going to designate a mental health agent or a medical power of attorney, I do have clients who would like it's a different person. They want for one person to be able to handle the medical components of medical power of attorney stuff, and they want another person to do the mental health decision making. So this is really important so that the hospital knows, or you know, the jail knows, whoever knows that when this person is unable, when a doctor has decided that this person is unable to make medical decisions, therefore this other person gains the ability to make those decisions. And that means going along with the PAD. So their decision making does not supersede the decisions that are expressed within the PAD. Notification, this is one, and there are logistics issues when it comes to HIPAA and a variety of things when it comes to this, but this is a really important part. So y'all know that with HIPAA, what can happen is someone is taken in on an emergency detention order or whatever. They're suddenly in a hospital. No one knows where they are. Their loved ones don't know where they are. If you call the hospital to try to find out if they're there, they're not able to tell you if they're there or not. So what we do is we waive HIPAA for the purpose of notification only. So it's not, I'm telling you anything about their medical condition or anything else. All I'm doing is letting you know that your loved one that they've chosen, it's if the person decides that they are in here. And that gives that connection with the outside that is really important. So we also serve veterans. I mentioned that before. This is an opportunity to go ahead and make sure that veteran status is placed within the pad so that the veteran doesn't end up going to a civilian hospital and now they have to be transferred all around. It's just better to go ahead and get that information in there. And then to the extent that hospital preferences can be, well, to the extent that they can even be followed at all, but it's nice to be able to have it. For some places, there will be able to be used. In other places, the preference is not gonna work. Okay, so critical physical medical conditions. Again, to build upon the problem of where, you know, someone is in the ER and they're not able to express themselves necessarily in a clear way, or just people aren't able to hear it. Right. There's so much going on with the mental health struggle that is combined with I'm having physical medical issues and who knows what else, that I'm not able to get this information, this concrete information about what medically is going on that's physical medical. So many of our clients have they have diabetes. They have liver disease, all different kinds of things. This is information that the medical providers need. They need it. This is the way to do it. We created this section because of this need. So one of the things that here, this is a good example of, so I have a client who she had been experiencing unsheltered homelessness for a couple of years, and she had contracted some kind of infection. I don't remember the name, but it's bad. And she kept going to the ER to get help, but every time she did, all that they could see, or all the information they were able to obtain, was based on the mental health issues. So she kept being routed into psych units and psych hospitals. And what ended up happening was she passed out at a bus stop. And that's when, once she passed out at a bus stop, she was taken in an ambulance to an ER. And at that point, because she's not awake, they were able to identify that there was a medical issue, and she was immediately admitted. But that's a very good example of how our clients, they are trying to get medical help, but the fact of the mental illness is interfering with the ability to get the medical assistance that they need. Dietary restrictions or special needs. This is just such a dignity thing. And in addition to being just basic access to being able to eat, our clients, so often they don't have access to dental services. And so they end up, having many teeth problems. And so I think that it's really important to give the opportunity here to acknowledge if there are some kinds of special needs regarding their dental issues, as well as if they're a vegetarian or if they're kosher or whatever. People should have the ability to have this information put in there, and how powerful it is when we're able to honor that type of choice. That's such a powerful thing to be able to honor that. And that also helps establish that relationship and flipping that dynamic. And we also in this section put additional treatments, just like we do for the psychoactive medication. What are the additional treatments? What are the additional things that help? Maybe my yoga is helping or my exercise is helping with my diabetes, whatever it may be. Okay, here's the one. We always put this in. This is a section that is in every single pad that we do. Information for law enforcement and crisis personnel. Okay. Like I said before, the CIT teams are fantastic, and there's all kinds of great training and information. I hats off. I worked at a clubhouse in Houston, and I had engagement with the crisis intervention team in Houston, and they were phenomenal. There is also individualized information, though, that our clients are able to provide to us. So when I am in a crisis, I know that I sometimes don't think people are who they say they are. I think that they're imposters. But I know that if you tell me that, hey, I didn't warp here, I'm not an imposter, I will believe you. So we can get, when the person is well, this information about what will help to de-escalate or what will help to minimize an escalation. It's so individualized, and it really can turn on, just the tiniest thing. And so there's just really important information here for law enforcement. Again, it's things that can help de-escalate and things that may cause escalation. This one, one of the things that we have discovered with our veterans who are combat veterans, when we do training for PADS for combat veterans, we were fortunate enough, in addition to 3 peers, to have a veteran on our team who he was Bravo 11. He was in the Iraq surge as an infantry. In the infantry. And so he's, combat veteran. He's, lost friends to suicide, and he's been doing this kind of work because of those reasons. What we discovered when we were working with him very quickly is that the engagement with law enforcement that happens with veterans who are combat veterans can be very different than the engagement that would happen with civilians because of their training. And so for us, he always has to sign off for someone who's going to help a combat veteran create a PAD. So I think that there's additional specialized training for when your clients are combat veterans. Okay, again, we want to avoid arrests, that's just to the extent that we can. That's what this information provides. And also, again, I don't think that it can be emphasized enough, the relationship. So one of the things that an example for this section is have a client, he's a public defender client, and his mother was trying to get help. He was having a mental health crisis. She called 911. They issued the emergency detention order was issued. The police went out and they were going to take him to a hospital. The engagement, the way that the engagement ended up happening, that the end result was that he was tased, he was tased more than once, he was pepper sprayed. He's probably maybe, gosh, he can't be more than about 5 foot. He weighs about 140 pounds, if that. He's a very small person. So he was tased multiple times, he was pepper sprayed, and he managed to collect multiple assault on a public servant charges. So all very bad for everybody. When I met him, this was much after, this was after this incident. We did a PAD, and we had to do it kind of quickly. He was in jail. So we did the PAD, and we made sure that we included this information for law enforcement and crisis personnel. So he was released on PR bond, and then he violated those terms. And so then the law enforcement he has a warrant out, and they're going to go pick him up again. We were able to make sure that they had a copy of the PAD so that they could see this one section, so that when they went to pick him up, they would not end up in this whole big problem situation again. And so the victory with this client was that he was successfully picked up on a warrant and taken back to jail. Obviously, this is a success within a much larger problem. Without additional charges. Well, there's the violation, but there's not additional charges created within that engagement. And so it was a really concrete way to see it at work. Practical matters. Okay, household, who's going to pay my rent? Who's going to deal with my bills? Who's going to take care of my cat? Who's going to water my plants? Who's going to get my mail? Finances. This is a really good opportunity to be able to, this is where you're looking at conservatorship stuff again, where if I can plan in advance for if these certain things are happening, I can prepare to have somebody else take over certain things for my finances. I can create, very tailored powers of attorney, do that kind of stuff, set it up in advance so that that is prepared for, so that the issue of, well, once you have a mental health crisis, we can't trust you with your finances. It's well, of course, great. I have a plan, and here's what it is. So if somebody's employed and they're suddenly inside, if they're having a mental health crisis, there needs to be a plan for how to acknowledge, how to let the employer know. Somebody needs to be set out to do that. That's what the PAD enables with these really practical components. Same thing with education. This is really important. This is important for everybody, but for veterans, this is also really important because if they end up like flunking out because of not going to class, then they can lose their financial assistance for their education, and they're not going to get it back. Plus, people going into debt. Probation. Okay. So this is where we have the modification rather than revocation coming into play. have a client, he went into a mental health crisis. He had a death in the family, a very close family member committed suicide. He went into a mental health crisis. He ended up, well, first he ended up on the streets. I didn't know where he was. Then he ended up in a hospital, and I found him at that point. And this is where, had we all been on the same page, there was an opportunity here to modify his probation terms instead of what ended up happening, which is, of course, he's violating because he's in the psych hospital. He's not doing what he needs to do to meet the terms of his probation. And so this is where you have the ability, if you have the pad that can cross over criminal and civil systems, you have the ability to set it up so that you can do modifications rather than revocations, which is not only good for the human being, but it's good economically as well. And then again, if the person has an attorney, this is where you can make preparations for, hey, if I'm in the hospital, I need someone to call my attorney, and I've made preparations in advance so that somebody is calling probation, somebody is calling my attorney, so that I don't end up violated and have all these additional criminal problems because of a mental health crisis. Okay, effective communication section. We try to put this one in every pad as well. This is where we have the opportunity to provide lawyers and courts with information about which accommodations can you provide so that we can effectively communicate with each other. What I have found is that this is all very well-meaning. It's just the nature of the way that the system works, that there are people, our public defender clients, who have been declared incompetent or who are on the pathway to be declared incompetent, who are actually competent. It's just that the whoever's communicating with them, the lawyers or the courts, don't have the information that they need in order to provide the accommodation that would assist in the communication. If I have a client who has PTSD and they're inside the courtroom, and if there's going to be a ton of people in there, it's going to freak them out, and they're going to be triggered, so they're not going to be able to listen to the court and pay attention to what's going on. That is something that can be accommodated. That is based on their mental illness. So this is the opportunity to be able to reduce. So when it comes to competency, and I could give a million stories about the competency situation, but when we're looking at reforming and addressing this issue, so often we're looking at the flood. We're looking at the people who were sitting in jail, who are, these human rights issues, and they're sitting there and they're waiting, and this is awful and it's expensive. Let's focus also, we need to focus on that, but let's also try to turn down the spigot so that fewer people enter into the system. Okay, I'm almost done, Karen. So we have
we have 5 minutes, so we can allow for questions. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm almost done.
Okay.
Okay, so the additional sections that we add in sections for housing. So this is where we can identify what accommodations the person would need to be able to maintain their housing, what supports would enable those accommodations. So this where you get into really detailed pinning it down for supported housing. So there's a real opportunity there. Same thing with education, employment. The idea is to really, because we have the time, this is if you're doing a longer term relationship with the client, right? So this is not a client that you're sitting and doing in one session. This is a longer term relationship where you can really pin down what are the employment issues so that we can help the person to ask for the accommodations that they will need. What are their trauma triggers? Okay. So outreach and creation, the method for the outreach and the method for creation for PADS is critical. I think that this is where it's easy to fail before you even get going because of the challenges here. But there are ways around those. There are challenges that are not insurmountable. They can be addressed. So it's really important to have targeted and intentional outreach. The active engagement is really important. So for example, just having some flyers go out about, hey, come and do a pad. I've never seen it work. And it was tried across our service area and it was like silence. So, it really requires an active engagement in the outreach component. In person is by far the best. And I understand with COVID, but we'll get to that in a second. When I first started doing outreach for PADS, I went into our San Antonio clubhouse here, which is a phenomenal place. It's just a beautiful place. And I would do presentations on PADS and I would explain them. And then we would offer for people to sign up. And we were finding that, people were sitting there and going, yeah, I want a pad. And then we were talking about, well, let's sign up for you to attend this clinic, or, let's get this going. Very few people were coming to us. So what it took was for us to go and sit down with people and go, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? You raised your hand. And that's what it took. It took that personal engagement to be able to move forward with getting someone to create a pad. That's what it took. With unsheltered homeless, I've addressed this already, where really walking up to the person and talking with them and explaining it as a rights document. That's how it works. We are able to, because now that we're virtual, we've developed, out of necessity, these new tools that are going to be useful even after COVID. We have a weekly pad presentation that's given by one of our peers, and it's the opportunity for people to come on, to engage with the peer, to ask questions. And that really seems to work well. And then the workstation kiosks that we're hoping to set up around the city. So who conducts the outreach is really critical. This is the exact same with who helps the person to create the pad. If there is a power disparity, that's a problem. So if it's a real power disparity or even a perceived power disparity, if I am being offered to create a self-determination based document, I am not going to trust that it's really a self-determination based document if I am being offered by someone who has been involved in having me involuntarily hospitalized. It's just not going to work. So this is why it's so important that the peers are all over this, because peers have credibility. And I trust that person to allow me to make my own decisions. And that's what it comes down to with the pad, is that you have to be able to have the agency to say no. In order to make a decision, I don't have decision-making power unless I have the ability to disagree with you. Last slide, I'm almost done. Okay, so creating the pad is really about a conversation. It's an organic method. So it's all about this problem solving with the client. And this is why it's so important that you don't have this power disparity here, that in order to have that kind of really honest engagement, that's why peers are so critical here. We also, we have lawyers that do them. We have law students. So there are a variety of different people who can be involved in this, and certainly trained to do it. But the peers and consumers as a resource for this is just critical. They keep us in line. The pad within our work keeps us accountable. It keeps us accountable to the human being. So if we're out trying to do, this kind of advocacy over here, and suddenly we've switched into I'm doing what I think is best for that person instead of what they actually told me they wanted, the pad, it functions as an accountability. The last thing I'm going to say is that when we create the pads, especially virtually, this is the easiest way to do it in person too, but you can do it with just one person in person, is to have the person who's engaging with the client just having that engagement, and then another person transcribing and putting the information into the document. And what that does is you don't have a bunch of paper. So you're not like, oh, hello, do you want a pad? You do? Great. Well, here's a big giant stack of papers. That's really intimidating. And I don't want to deal with it. If I'm having a conversation and the pad is being created while I'm having this conversation, and then I can review it, that's as easy as possible. It just removes as many barriers for creating the pad as possible. There we go. I managed it, Kieran. So if there are any questions, I hope I was clear. I could, of course, talk about this endlessly.
You did awesome. Thank you. If anyone has any verbal questions that they would like to ask, if you could just use your reaction button on the bottom of your screen in the right hand, click on the raise hand. I see Patty Phillips. Patty Phillips, go ahead and take yourself off mute and ask your question.
My son was just released from a 5250. He is non-compliant with his medications. I'm going to have to wait until he's stable before I can help him with this, right?
So would he want to work with you on it, or is it something that he would want to work with somebody else? Because oftentimes working with a non-family member is really helpful, because there are all these dynamics that have developed over the years, unfortunately. So is that the kind of situation?
Yeah, he would not want to work with me. It would have to be.
Okay. Yeah. So for us, I mean, the thing is that I don't wait for someone to be like, if someone is unsheltered homeless, I'm not waiting for them to be, well, to work on a pad. So the answer to that is I would say no. This is something that he could move forward with. Now, can it be amended and adjusted over time? Absolutely. But, obviously the person has to have capacity and they need to understand what they're doing. But I would say that if pads were available and there was someone able to help him with it, it's really helpful to be able to work with someone who's not a family member sometimes, because it allows the family to be the family. And it's easier to have those kinds of engagements and really problem solve without those underlying the tensions that can be there. And the other thing that's really great, the very first pad that I ever did it went into a California court. So it was a client who he is from El Paso and he's really young. He also has a lot of medical conditions because he was hit by a car. And he was living with his mom and he had like a bipolar psychotic break. And he ended up going to LA to pursue, a music career. Or he ended up arrested pretty quickly and put in LA County Jail. And what ended up happening was when he got out, he still had these charges pending. But he got out, he went back home to El Paso. And what the judge was saying in LA was, you're going to have to put him under guardianship or we're going to haul him back here to California and put him back in LA County Jail. And so we're like, oh crap, what are we going to do? So we talked to his mom and they were having all kinds of problems with the living situation. He was living with her and there were just, it was a problem. So I ended up working with him. We created a pad that had the manifestation section. So really some detailed problem solving. And what we ended up finding out was that there were so many concrete ways that his mother was able to help him, but that he hadn't been able to express to her in a way that they were talking past one another. So we were able to do some super detailed problem solving within the pad. And when we went over it with her, so I created it with him by himself, and then he wanted her to see it. So we went over it with her and she started crying because she said that she had been trying to help him in all the ways that she knew how, but what she was doing wasn't working. And now we had just given her a toolkit for things that she could do that would help. And so that's what ended up happening with that. And what the court did was, once we created the pad and we had self-determination based documents, the California court ended up accepting it and dismissing the charges. And he's still in El Paso with his mom and he does his music on YouTube now instead of in LA. So I'm not sure if that was really
Very
helpful.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. One thing I did want to mention, and some of the counties have reached out to me on this on the call. I just wanted to mention too that quite a few of the questions that are in the chat are exact questions that we're answering on the Innovation Statewide project. So if you're interested in being a part of it and your county isn't currently on it, and the counties would like to join the project, this is a great opportunity. We are looking at a statewide model. It is difficult to have pads move forward when there's so many different pockets of how you do it or how you want the pads to look or the template or the training. So we really are in this innovation project looking for a consistent statewide model and having that toolkit. And really being able to, in the first part of the project, is really working with counties and the members in your county to really understand. And so that we will address issues such as who's the right person to be that partner on the pad with the individual writing the pad. What are the template questions and what really makes sense for our clients and consumers in our state. And so really looking at the interoperability, the law is saying that come January 2022, we have to have this interoperability between our data systems, between mental health and physical health. And so how does that look? And so we would like to be able to really roll out, this is where our dedicated portal is that at that point, anybody can put pads into it. So really hoping that that we can all band together as a state and look at how to create pads in the most efficient and effective way to be successful for our communities and our clients. And with that, any other verbal questions? I don't see any hands.
I'll just pop in real quick here, Kieran, to say that this opportunity is just fantastic in so many ways. But one of the really cool things about it, I think, is that y'all have the ability to focus in on different populations. Like, I don't have that ability. We are doing all of these different kinds of populations at the same time. So we're learning a lot. But what y'all have the ability to do is, with different counties focusing on different populations, to see, okay, which is working better for reducing the cycle of recidivism, to see how PADS enter into the system. I mean, and of course the populations overlap, but I'm really excited to see which entrance ways into the system and which populations lead to the most effective results. I think that's really great that y'all's system enables us to be able to see those results. That's exciting.
Does anybody have any other verbal questions? I am going to, I saw that some folks were having to leave, and so I put the survey in a little after 11 o'clock. I'm going to.
You're on mute, Kieran.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I've just had a whole conversation by myself. I went ahead and put the survey in. I had to put it in a little early. Some folks had to leave at 11. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to look at the survey, and we have it in English and in Spanish. But please, we are looking forward to more conversations in our communities. If you have any other information that you'd like, feel free to reach out. I appreciate all your time today. Just wanted to double check one last time if anyone had any verbal questions that they'd like to ask.
Will we be able to get this presentation online somewhere?
Yes. Thank you for that question. It will be uploaded to a YouTube site, and that site will be sent out when we address all the questions in the chat. And from there, we'll be able to send you that link, and you'll just be able to link right over to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A great presentation.
Thank you. We're very happy to have Lori on board. So this is an exciting time with PADS. Oh, we have, Dr. Shipper.
Hello. I have a question. I don't know what the basis for the response would be, but I'm curious as to what percentage of people who, I don't know, on a caseload or in a clinic, would you say are willing to do a psychiatric advanced directives? Like, what's the participation rate, essentially?
It depends on how they're approached and who approaches them. If when we engage with clients, it's very high. It's very, very high, but it totally depends on how they're approached. If it's within, like, I think that oftentimes PADS are offered within the context of a variety of other things, like within an intake or something, and that doesn't seem to really work. You really need that targeted approach of, hey, I'm here, I'm not a person in power, and this is something that I'm offering to help you with, and then to explain what it is. Because oftentimes I think it's like, do you want to create a PAD? And people are like, yeah, no. And then they think about, this is legal stuff with this giant piece of paper and, papers and papers. No, I don't want anything to do with that. When you approach it in a different way, and especially depending on when you can engage with the person, if they're unsheltered homeless, this is a rights document, and this is like, I sit here and help you do this. If it is a person who comes in and they're like, someone is bugging my television, it's okay, well, have you ever been hospitalized? Would you like to tell people what you want? It's high if you approach it in certain ways. It's really important who approaches and how they do it. So that would be a situation where, if you were focusing on certain types of populations, or you had something specific in your mind of, I would like for my patients to be able to have this opportunity, then it becomes, okay, well, how can a structure be set up to enable the type of outreach and PAD creation that will allow it to work? When it comes to like hospitals here, one of the things that it's really important is that for us is to be able to have kind of an intermediary between discharge and creating the PAD. That's helpful. But again, we have this client in the psych hospital that we're currently doing the PAD over Zoom with an ASL interpreter. So I could keep saying the same thing, but it's almost, I would say for us, it's probably 80%, if not higher. But it would be very easy for that to drop off. And before we started to realize all of these challenges of the outreach, it was low. So I'm not sure if that's helpful.
You know, I have personally experienced contact with folks with severe mental illness. And I feel that I don't think any of those with severe mental illness will be able to evaluate or give information that we're looking for in the PAD. And sometimes they may give you one answer, and then a few minutes later, they may want to give you a different answer. So I think from this perspective, I think it makes it a little bit more difficult. And the ones who are able to answer those questions, I don't think they have the severe mental health issues which we are looking at right now. So how would you address that?
So I think you'd be really surprised so for example, unsheltered homeless, right? We're sitting in a courtyard where there are services being provided to people who are unsheltered homeless, and we have a table sitting there and we have a laptop. You're having a conversation with that person. And I understand that there are challenges, but people can still make decisions. They still know what things they want and what things they don't want. So it may not be as detailed or as much information as you would be able to get for someone who is not, currently experiencing psychosis. However, you can still get critical information that can really assist when it comes to how to treat the person if they're in crisis. You can get the information for law enforcement and crisis personnel. You can find out the things that are important to them in their life. You can find out the medical conditions that they are dealing with. Every bit of that is really important information, and it opens the door to be able to provide other services. That's one of the critical components when you're talking about that population, is that it opens the door. But I think you'd probably be surprised, especially when you're having a conversation, when that's the way you're creating the document, is you're sitting there, you're not rushed, you're having this conversation and you're finding out what works and what doesn't, what do I like and what do I not like. I wish I could bring you and sit you down next to me. I wish you could see that happening. It's just really incredible. I would say that I think you would be pleasantly surprised at what can be accomplished, even with people with the most severe challenges.
Thank you very much.
And I have Denise Coleman that's been waiting patiently. Denise, if you want to go ahead with your question, and then we will end with Denise's question.
All right. Being a peer and also being on the board and working for the county, I noticed that I do RAP plans one-on-one with peers. So to be honest, I love RAP plans, but reality is I'm not going to grab my RAP plan before I go into crisis. That's just reality. And my RAP plan changes every time I grow in a certain field. And the medications don't work anymore. My insurance changed, whatever the reasons are. So I'm looking at, I do think people that do RAP plans should probably do this, because we meet more one-on-one with a person and can actually do a more detailed job, because this sounds great. Is it an actual electronic file that we could sit down and do it electronically to send it to the doctors? Or is it going to just be the paperwork that I see of the link that you gave us?
Okay, so there's a couple things here. First of all, yay. I'm so glad you brought up, hello peer. And I'm so glad that you brought up RAP. Okay, so all of the peers that we have that are working for our organization are RAP facilitators, because, and it happened that way, but that skill set is so important, and they're complementary, right? Absolutely. Ideally, what you would be able to do is at the end of a RAP class, have a clinic or a time where you're taking that information and you're sticking it into a pad. So now you don't need a RAP to make a pad, but you have all of this other really great substantive information that you've already collected. So it's even easier. So yes, I would love to have a direct connection between RAPs and pad. It just makes so much sense as a bookend. And then when it comes to the paper and all that kind of stuff, that's something that Karen can talk to, because it's going to be addressed during the time for the innovation project of how to deal with that. We're super low tech right now. I mean, we're doing our best, but I mean, we honestly have people who are like, here's my pad, or we go and give it to law enforcement, the client wants us to do, or we give it to the hospital where they're normally, where they would go, so that they have it in their records. Right now, because of not having a standardized system, the easiest way to get it into the system is when we have veterans, because it's easy with the VA. Now I can't go anywhere else, but it's easy with the VA. That's one of the really critical components of having this project and being able to do this on a statewide basis.
Okay,
Great
thanks.
question.
Thank you.
I just want to thank everyone for participating today. I want to honor everyone's time. It's a little bit after 11:30. There's a lot of questions, especially surrounding our innovations project. We'll make sure that we get that out when we put out our response as well. One of the other counties just wanted me to make sure that as we look at this PAD project statewide, we're not looking at rolling it out to every person in our state. We really are looking at pilot populations. We'd really like to see success figuring out how to get the pads, collect the pads, upload the pads, and really finding success in our specific groups of populations that the counties or stakeholders have identified. So this isn't about this mass blast of pads, because that's honestly what's not been successful in so many areas. It should really be a more mindful, focused approach so that we can find success. And then you move on to the next group and have success, and on and on and on. And so that's really what the project is. This is not a rapid fire project at all. It's about community building. It's about peer support. It's about peer training. It's about really understanding PADS, about a template that's usable, as well as ongoing training material for our counties in 9 languages. We're looking at all the threshold languages, and then ultimately having that database where we can house them and move on from there. And so it's a definite. What I gave you was just such a little snapshot. It will be presented in front of the MHSOAC in May. But if you're interested, if your county mental health plan is interested in it, you need to just have them contact me, and we can move forward from there. But I will also send you out any information on that as we send out the response to this meeting. If you have any peers or peer organizations and consumer rights groups on April 1st, we're doing this again for them, really cater to a conversation with our peers. And so I just again want to thank you for your time. If you could please fill out your survey, we would really appreciate it. And with that, we will say goodbye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all very much for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.